I'm Anne Hutchings, Managing Director of Hutchings Consultants, the UK's leading independent pharmacy transfer agents. Welcome to our update on the pharmacy market. In the next few minutes, my aim is to tell you what's been happening to the goodwill values of pharmacies, particularly in view of the recent government bombshell regarding funding cuts to pharmacies in England. Since the start of the year, the most frequent question I've been asked is, how will the government cuts affect the value of my pharmacy? At this point, it may be helpful to recap on what we know about these proposed government cuts. Last December, on the 17th, just before Christmas, when nobody was expecting it, the Pharmacy Minister, Alastair Burt, announced funding cuts for community pharmacies for 2016 to 2017 of £170 million. This represented a 6% reduction in cash terms. Unfortunately, whilst the £170 million caught the headlines, there was rather more to this announcement, and I think this has caused uncertainty and confusion. My understanding of the government proposals is the £170 million will be clawed back in the 6 months from October 2016 to March 2017. The amount of the £170 million reduction in funding is non-negotiable and applies to 2016-2017. The implication here is that there's likely to be more cuts to follow in future. The Department of Health have indicated they would like to do several things, and firstly, to phase out over several years the establishment payments of around £25,000 per pharmacy. Secondly, change monthly repeat scripts to 3 monthly for patients with long-term conditions. Over the last couple of years, we've noticed the trend for MDS, which was weekly, to be switched to monthly. Thirdly, they'd like to change the law to encourage dispensing by centralised automated hubs. They see this as a way for pharmacies to reduce their operating costs. Fourthly, they'd like to see better use of technology to allow patients to send their scripts electronically to online pharmacies. And fifthly, see up to about 3,000 pharmacies closed down. Before we look at where the market is now, for comparison, you should understand what the market was like prior to the government announcement. For several years up to December 2015, we had experienced a period of goodwill prices increasing. We'd not quite returned to the high valuations of 2007 to 2008, which were prior to the crash, but we were in some cases getting close. I know pharmacists like to talk pence in the pound, and if we just take an average of our recent sales, we've been getting around 123 to the pound. The problem with this statistic is that there's all sorts of variables which affect goodwill values, some pushing values up and some pulling them down. For example, our highest pence in the pound last year was £1.78, and this was for a pharmacy in Northamptonshire. We got 25 offers for this pharmacy. You may be wondering what was so special about the pharmacy. Well, it was in Northants, which is a very popular area with buyers. The pharmacy was purpose-built next to a surgery with no immediate competition. It was also of a size which was under 1 million in turnover, which was within the purchasing power of many would-be buyers. In contrast, the lowest price achieved last year was 79 pence in the pound, and this was for a pharmacy in Norwich. We only got 2 offers on this because it was affected by a new pharmacy contract at the site of their main doctor's surgery. This kind of uncertainty, not knowing how much the turnover will drop, turns buyers away, and they're naturally concerned at the risk. In addition, banks will not be keen to lend on this type of purchase. So that's a brief summary of where we were prior to the government announcement. The announcement on the 17th of December was a cleverly planned move by the government. With people gearing up for Christmas, it being a very busy time of year, and also a holiday period, the timing from the government's point of view was probably spot on. I don't think that pharmacists really started to digest this bad news, or in some cases even become aware of the announcements until fairly well into January. Initially, through much of January, we didn't see anything happening to the market. Our existing agreed sales continued to progress, and new sales were receiving interest as normal. Then gradually a few pharmacy buyers started to contact us. This was in cases where the sale had been agreed prior to the cuts announcement. Typically, they'd be telling us that the pharmacy price should be reduced to reflect the forthcoming cuts. So, how did we react? Well, each case is different, and also vendors are different. We had a couple of sales where the price was reduced a bit, but to be honest, they were only small adjustments. We had only one sale which actually fell through because the first-time buyer got cold feet. But in this case, we had another buyer lined up to take on the sale, and that buyer didn't even try to reduce his original offer that had been made prior to the cuts. In other sales, we held firm, simply saying, with the vendor's approval, that there was no room for negotiation and the price would not be reduced. These sales have continued on track without a price reduction. So overall, a fairly good result, as in the majority of our sales, the question of reducing the price was not even raised. With new sales which have come onto the market since December, I would say that the government proposals have taken a little bit of the edge off valuations. Certainly, we're not seeing any price increases. The situation is that where we have a pharmacy which is very desirable because it's a solid, profitable business in a good location with no issues such as doctors moving, etc., this type of pharmacy is still generating multiple offers resulting in premium prices. However, where a pharmacy does have an issue or is perhaps in a remote area, then whereas before we would still have been able to negotiate and generate reasonable interest, now buyers are being more picky. This type of pharmacy is becoming more difficult to sell. The other thing which has happened since January is that a lot more pharmacy owners have decided to sell. We've actually taken on 62% more business in the first 3 months of this year than in the same 3 months of 2015. In practice, what this means is that there's more choice for buyers. Although having said this, fortunately for vendors, it's still a seller's market. We have a database of several thousand buyers. Of these, over 70% are first-time buyers, and the remainder a mixture of existing pharmacy owners, ranging from pharmacy owners with one shop to those with small, medium and large groups, including some multiples. I have noticed since the beginning of the year that buyers are looking more closely at the details of the pharmacy. Such factors which could affect the business, staff levels, gross margins, etc. And if these are out of sync with other pharmacies, then they're more inclined to move on to the next pharmacy. Banks are still funding pharmacy purchases, but traditionally they nearly always value the pharmacy at less than the agreed price. Again, since the new year, I've noticed buyers querying this more than, for example, they have in the past, and being more concerned about the amount of the undervalue. Therefore, I would say it's more important than ever to try and do things to maximise the value of your pharmacy in the run-up to a sale. And a few of the key areas to look at, for example, gross profit. This is one of the first things a buyer will look at. You should know your gross profit margin. However, do you know how it compares to other similar pharmacies? If your pharmacy is underperforming by industry standards, this will affect the price you get when you sell. Many pharmacies with careful stock purchasing can increase their margin by a couple of %. And what this means is that if, for example, your turnover is around £1 million and you increase your gross profit by 2%, which is £20,000, this could increase the value of your pharmacy by more than £100,000. Property leases are another area to look at. If you rent the pharmacy premises, make sure your lease is renewable under the Landlord and Tenant Act and that you have a reasonable period left on the lease. A buyer will usually be looking for 10 years plus. If a lease renewal is left until the last minute, this can substantially delay the completion of a sale. Costs are another area to review. Have a good look at the pharmacy expenses and see if there's room to reduce these. For example, the premises rates may be worth looking at, particularly if this is quite a large business expense for you. Are you being overcharged? Staff wages. Many of the pharmacies we see are overstaffed. Now, whether you want to do anything about this prior to selling your pharmacy is up to you. But you should be aware that your staff costs have a direct effect on your bottom line profits, and this will influence the amount a buyer will pay for your business. For example, reducing your staff costs by, say, £20,000 could potentially add at least £100,000 to the value of your pharmacy. So, where are pharmacy values heading next? Without a crystal ball, it's difficult to know. There are two general opinions on this. Firstly, the only way is down, with 6% cuts on the table likely to be followed by more cuts in the short term. In the next 2 to 3 years, prices can only realistically be expected to decrease. Alternatively, values will increase. The government wants to get rid of pharmacies in clusters, reducing the number of pharmacies by between 1,000 and 3,000. Therefore, there should be a bigger slice of the pie for remaining pharmacies. Who is right and who is wrong is up for debate, but whatever the eventual outcome, I suspect it will take a number of years before the full impact of the cuts filters through. In the meantime, we're left in a period of uncertainty, making it difficult for pharmacy owners nearing retirement to know what to do for the best. So, should you sell now whilst prices are good, or hang on for a few more years? I think the current market is good if you're wanting to sell. Prices are close to the highest they've been for the last 7 or 8 years. If you're thinking about whether to sell now or in the next year or so, I suppose the question to ask yourself is, if things go pear-shaped and prices drop, am I prepared to weather the storm and perhaps keep the pharmacy for another 7 years until values pick up again? The other thing to mention, and I know I'm always harping on about this, is tax rates are so small at the moment, meaning that most of you shouldn't be paying more than 10% tax on the pharmacy sale. Remember, it's about the overall package, not just the sale price, but what you are actually left with in your pocket after the sale that really matters. So I'd just like to recap on the key points mentioned in this podcast. Firstly, pharmacy goodwill values have been steadily increasing up until the December cuts announcement. Since then, although the market is still buoyant, the edge has come off it slightly, which has put a bit of a damper on prices. Buyers are a little more discerning, picking up issues they may have just accepted in the past. Multiple offers are still being received for pharmacies which are perceived to be good quality in desirable areas. There are more pharmacies on the market since Christmas, with people deciding to sell as a result of the cuts. However, there are so many buyers that this has not generally affected the market, which is still a seller's market. What's going to happen to prices in the next few years is anyone's guess, but I don't see them increasing in the near future. So if you are coming up to retirement, now may actually be a good time to sell. So hopefully this information has given you some food for thought. If you're thinking of selling up and would like a free valuation, please give me a call on 01 494 722 The number is actually on the picture on your screen. I've also written a book called Selling Your Pharmacy for All It's Worth. It's free to anyone who's thinking of selling their pharmacy. For a free copy, please go to our website. Again, that's on our picture on the screen. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.